Hey everyone, and welcome back to another edition of DLT's ContinuousX podcast series, hosted by myself, Jim Fitzmaurice, Michael Fitzurka, and Rick Stewart from DLT Solutions. We are very excited about today's episode and our special guest joining us today, Mr. Nicolas Chaillan. Appointed as the first Air Force Chief Software Officer and the co-lead for the Department of Defense Enterprise DevSecOps Initiative, with the Department of Defense Chief Information Officer. As the Air Force's senior software czar, Nick is responsible for enabling Air Force programs in their transition to Agile and DevSecOps to establish force-wide DevSecOps capabilities and best practices, including continuous authority to operate processes and faster, streamlined technology adoption. Nick, you talk a lot about Platform One on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and we assume at this point that you can do it in your sleep. Today, we'd like to delve into a different side of you and discuss your origin story behind Platform One, some of the challenges you're facing in your CSO role within the Air Force, and what the future holds for you. So, Nick, appreciate you participating in our podcast episode today, and we'll get right into the questions here. So, Nick, I'll kick things off here. Question one. So, why did you create Platform One, and what was your tipping point to fully pursue the vision to say, we really want to go after this and create this?
Yeah, of course, and thanks for having me. I think what was the tipping point is really when we come to realize that we had so many teams spend so much time building the same Lego blocks, the same infrastructure and platform, and really wanted to make that an easier adoption. And so spending a year to build a software factory just so you can focus on building your mission software, the second year is obviously a year wasted. And also, of course, not the best investment of the taxpayer money. And so Platform One really came to be because of the number of teams now adopting DevSecOps across DoD and really trying to streamline access to these tools and really empower the teams to adopt DevSecOps without having to reinvent the wheel.
What was Nick, is it DevSecOps first, chicken and egg kind of thing, and then Platform One was a manifestation of how to do this and how to pull the technology and change the culture? Is that your approach?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the chicken and the egg, right? Because of course, Platform One is using DevSecOps to exist itself. It's using a factory to build its own stack as well. So it's kind of everything is intertwined and everything goes together. But what's for sure is, when you start growing with different teams adopting DevSecOps, that's where you realize that enterprise services are critical, both on the Cloud One side with the Cloud Office and easy access to cloud services, whether it's on Amazon or Azure or other cloud providers. And then, on the platform side with Platform One to streamline access to CI/CD pipeline, Kubernetes containers, hardened containers, and having a central team accrediting and providing a managed service stack is game changing, right? For all the DoD programs struggling with training their teams, getting started. Now they can just piggyback on the existing environments across classification levels. And that's really where, the DoD needs to do a pretty strong push in the next, couple of years, both in terms of digital engineering, both in terms of AI machine learning, deep learning. We partnered with Jake for AI machine learning as a service on Platform One. So we're going to bring a full Kubeflow stack on Platform One to access AI machine learning. And then on the OSD R&E side, we're partnering to build a digital engineering as a service stack on Platform One. So teams and DoD programs can just access digital engineering tools on the cloud to start embracing all the new abilities of digital engineering as well.
Hey, Nick, real quick off of that. Prior to being put in that CSO position, did you have the framework, that software factory concept in your mind already, and you were just, hey, I just need to be in the right position to make that happen?
Yeah, I think that's what we needed. We needed an organization and kind of the right push. And being on the AQ side, the acquisition side, makes a lot of sense, right? That the CIO side often does not have the funding, and so then you have to wait for the funding cycle, and often 2 years before being able to do something meaningful. Being on the acquisition side with SAFAQ, we can partner with DoD programs and merge these engagements into single engagements, enterprise engagements, partner with the large programs like F-35, GBSD, JAIC, Unified Platform, and really help them bring this to life in a centralized way while making sure that this is not a one-size-fits-all. And Platform One, I think, is successful because we think of Platform One as a company, and the program offices are the customers. And really, if you're not able to tailor your services to various options, and that's why we have the Party Bus, which is a multi-tenant environment for program offices to consume and get access to DevSecOps very rapidly, in a matter of days, all the way to a big bang instance, which is a dedicated enclave specific to a program with tailored tools and tailored deployments based on their requirements.
I would assume with something this large and enterprise-wide that there were probably a lot of obstacles and pushback that you may have encountered initially and probably ongoing. Can you speak to that some?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually surprised. A lot of people were really dying for an enterprise service of quality. I think the issue is people have been burned in the past with previous enterprise services on different things where the service was mandated, it was not built to scale, it was expensive, it was mostly pushing outdated technologies, and it was often a one-size-fits-all approach, mandating one option. Platform One always brings us options. We have multiple tools for every kind of CI/CD, DevSecOps capability. So really empowering teams to pick the right tools to get the job done. 16 programming languages, 23 databases, and so on. And so I think that was a different mindset when people realized, hey, we're trying really to bring options and centrally accredit and move at a pace of relevance. I think people got pretty excited. Of course, you still had a few teams that were struggling between, okay, I'm already building a factory and it's already progressing pretty well. How do I now shift or readjust to start consuming some of the Platform One stack? And really that's been one of the big issue for those teams to really find a way to redesign their timelines to adjust to that new service capability that did not exist when they started all these engagements. And so it's obviously going to take time for everyone to be aligned. We're not mandating it. I think Carrot is really the continuous ATO with DoD-wide reciprocity, and then, of course, the ease of access to tools and the contract vehicle of Platform One as well.
Hey, Nick, along those lines that Mike just brought up, Twoprong kind of follow up to that is there something that's different now? Because I also have had, on LinkedIn, people post that, hey, this is just the same old song and dance over the last 2 decades that have been tried on a few different occasions, right? And there's a lot of detractors that are out there, right? And I know that on your post, there's a lot of trolls out there as well. Is there something that you would either say, hey, it's different now because of X, and vice versa? The second follow up to that is there one thing that you point to that you guys are doing specifically now with the Platform One that you can say it's different now because of this?
I think there are multiple things, right? One, the first aspect is stars are aligned, both on the leadership side, the teams are willing, the defense industrial base is willing, so everything is aligned. The technology change, right? Containers, Kubernetes enables the reuse of code. When you just try to share source code, when you have different disparate environments that don't often connect and run the same technology stack, it's very difficult to share Lego blocks, right? When you move to containers and Kubernetes and you have the stem abstraction layer, now you become flexible, modular. And on top of it, when you bring the cyber stack, and we spend a lot of time with my team, with Cyber Command and NSA and DoD CIO, to really educate on behavior detection, zero trust, with what we're doing on the Kubernetes cyber stack, which is baked in and brings us that baked in security and continuous monitoring visibility on what's going on. So I think that the tech piece, the cyber piece are checking all the boxes. The culture piece is getting there. We have people from the bottom up asking to do this. I was also very excited to see the big DoD primes really embrace the DevSecOps mindset. Several of them are actually hiring, funny enough, a chief software officer role, so that demonstrate their will and desire to start embracing DevSecOps, building internal DevSecOps teams, enterprise teams, to be able to serve across DoD programs. So it's not now just an investment made by the program office. It's really enterprise defined in partnership often with Platform One, with the big primes like Lockheed and Northrop and Raytheon and many others are working with us now to get this done. It's pretty exciting to see that some of these companies are even changing their business models. You see some of these primes now bringing containers to Platform One and be able to sell these containers as a managed service component, a consumption-based service, very much in effect becoming a product company, like you will see, startups out there sell their licenses and their services instead of being a service company, building code and work for hire. So it's a very different mindset, is bringing these Lego blocks, these capabilities that can be reused across programs and pay-per-use kind of model. So it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, and I want to pull on that SI string a little bit and a couple more questions later on, Nick. But going back to a derivative of what Jim said about you are kind of a change agent and you are the tip of the spear, and changing culture is quite a difficult task when you have a pretty static environment that likes the way the status quo is going and whatnot. So having success with Platform One and all the initiatives that you're doing, if you could change one thing, go back in the rearview mirror and change one thing, or constraints or challenges that you've encountered, maybe in the approach to provisioning or some other aspect, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing I would change is myself, in a way that I was a little bit too aggressive. I also did not understand the DoD when I got started. When you're just thrown into the pool and you're told, hey, go do this, and really with no training, no background, I didn't know anything about the organizations, who does what, and different ranks, all that kind of DoD specific language. It was very difficult for me to get used to the silos and understand how do you build coalition across all these teams and convince all these people to start embracing DevSecOps. I think now that I'm building relationships with all these different organizations, it's getting easier and easier to get stuff done. So it's been great, but I should have probably spent more time in trying to understand the lay of the land, what's happening. Quite honestly, there were a lot of teams doing a lot of different things. There was no coordination, and it's very exciting to see now with the committee of practice for DevSecOps of 1,400 people across DoD, and really one of the few engagement that I know that's bringing all the services together, the full SysDay and the DIB, plus startups and FFRDCs and S&T organizations like DARPA and DIU. I think it's pretty exciting to see after I've been here maybe 20 months now. So I think that's one thing. One thing I would change is probably my approach to people and to things. Sometimes jumping to conclusion, not understanding truly all their impediments to changing that culture, and the fact that they often did not have many options to do it because of different issues they were facing that I often did not understand.
Yeah, but I think when you get into this cultural change, you do have to embrace yourself into it and, really put yourself out there. So we appreciate it because we've been following along with your progress and your success with not only Platform One, but it's this cultural dynamic change, this openness, this collaboration. And we decided that you are somebody that we want to embrace because we feel like you're heading in the right direction. Where I think other people were like, well, let's not stay next to Nick in the hallway. We might get it on the side. But it's nice to see that you're getting a lot of success, and you're a valued presenter. Every one of your speeches is well attended, and you draw a lot of people. And I think the message that you're sending from our perspective is spot on.
Yeah, and it may be that aggression is needed to change a culture. I mean, it's not. Yeah. You can't do that lightly.
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I think, I'm doing a little bit better with the carrot instead of the stick. And I think you get more people excited. And I think also, the French thing, accent, was a challenge.
I was waiting for it. That always comes in.
You're French? I didn't know that.
People are getting used to the accent, I think, and it takes some time. And even for me, it's such a culture. When you move from the commercial side, having done startups, and being in control of your team and making decisions to a massive organization like this, by definition, you're supposed to have quite a few issues to get there.
Well, and let me touch on that real quick, Nick, because I've heard all three of you now over the last few minutes say culture several times. And that is something that we are continually talking about. And Rick, I know, we did a few articles in and around DevSecOps and culture and how important it is. And Nick, one thing I would point to is to say, in terms of the work that you and your teams are doing within Platform One, is culture is so vital to being able to stand up a DevSecOps practice, right? And Rick and Mike and I talk about it a lot is, on our side and the role that we play, we are constantly looking at those RFIs, the market research, the OTAs that are dropping and working in conjunction with our vendor clients. And part of what we see is, they will put out a 50-page RFI trying to set up a DevSecOps practice or pipeline software factory, if you will. And the verbiage that they put out, it isn't DevSecOps. It isn't culture. It isn't embracing, it's still very much either waterfall or that siloed, which really, speaks against what you guys are trying to do on Platform One. So tip of the cap to you guys, because I think at the end of the day, right or wrong, when you're trying to be a change agent and doing it in the way that you guys are, we're following closely, and I'm excited about what the future holds with you guys.
Well, it's nice to have success. I mean, success is the best thing, and we talk about it in the projects. If you have success with a project that may be a prototype or avant-garde or something that's leaning forward, if you have success with it, people look over your shoulder and say, yes, I want more of that. I want to do that. How are they not having all-night death marches? How is that possible? And that's what brings people in to want to change the way they're doing things. Because obviously, if you're having those negative impacts on your personal time, et cetera, there's something wrong that needs to be changed.
Yeah, what I think is quite interesting is when I look at some of these RFPs, really, I think this has to do with multiple components. One is the lack of training of our acquisition people when it comes to DevSecOps. Even though we created the DAU DevSecOps Academy, very few teams yet have been able to go there and get the training. So they don't know what they don't know, and they of course know very well what are full. So you end up seeing this what are agile full programs, pretty much using DevSecOps in the middle here, but really not leveraging DevSecOps when it comes to program management, when it comes to acquisition. And so bringing the language and the contract vehicle, and that's why Platform One created the basic ordering agreements and also released the agile contracting guide that's on the software.app.me website to be able to educate people and provide language and templates to reuse, to be able to start order and buying agile, buying capacity, not buying requirements, and really understanding that mindset, and also mapping back to the DoD process, right? All these waterfall phased approaches where we have these very specific gates, very specific timelines, not embracing the MVP model and continuous engineering, continuous delivery of capabilities with feedback loop from the warfighters. That's never going to succeed if we don't fully embrace it, right? You can't just do a piece of DevSecOps and then the rest waterfall. And really that also implies that both Congress and CAPE and DoD is also embracing, and the acquisition side of DoD is also embracing and moving away from EVM, moving away from all these waterfall principles of phases to track success. Instead of continuously delivering capability, we see it with ABMS, right? Congress and GAO, and many don't understand that ABMS has to do these continuous testing and continuous delivery of capabilities to deliver agile capabilities, and ABMS has been delivering more capabilities than any other programs I've met, and yet they're getting these assessments from GAO and others saying, hey, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what's going on, and how they're spending their funding, which is completely untrue. Being part of the team and looking at what's being delivered is very tangible and quality software and capabilities, and connecting things that have never been connected before. But then again, you're not checking the box of the EVM, a 5-year plan, 2-year plan, and all this kind of outdated way of thinking, where you don't see any single company out there being able to follow that kind of model anymore if they want to compete with the rest of the market.
Yeah, and it's funny from the private sector, you build in DevSecOps or even Agile concept correctly. You want to take advantage of those technological disruptions, those innovative technologies that weren't even thought of maybe a year or two into your contract, but you still have to create the buggy whip where when Congress or any of the procurement agencies look at it as a whole, you might be successful as a program, but the task, the service is not, it doesn't meet the mark. So, because you couldn't change along the way.
Yeah, that's why even the term sustainment should be really banned from the vocabulary, both on the hardware and the software side. I don't care. Sure, there's always a sustainment piece on legacy hardware. I get that. I'm more flexible on the hardware side, but on the software side, we are moving to continuous engineering, and sustainment, cloud money, and all that kind of silo way of thinking. It's just not going to work anymore. You can't think this way.
Right.
Software continuously evolve.
Great. So Nick, this is the question I specifically wrote because I wanted to ask you of all the people that we're interviewing in future episodes. So you do this a lot, week, month. You are constantly out there, preaching the platform one, doing interviews, speaking engagements. Is there one burning question you've always wanted someone to ask in an interview like this, but until today, it hasn't been asked? And if there is a question, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? We obviously go out to be able to get feedback and really spread the good stuff and get people to understand what we're doing. I think, some of the questions that are more rare are about, how did I get here, with my French background. Obviously that's pretty unusual. Not that I like to talk about it, but I think the key aspect that people sometimes don't realize is, I don't have a degree. I didn't go to school. I created my first company. I was 15. And we see the government finally making the right moves to start removing the requirements of a degree, right? And it's funny how, I'm the chief software officer of the Air Force, but I could probably not be, at least at the time, be a developer in the Air Force because of the lack of degree. And so there are pieces out there and issues that we need to tackle when it comes to talent management and really ensuring we retain and we can compete with commercial organizations. We need strong architects. We need strong DevSecOps engineers to really ensure they're preserving the best interests of the taxpayer. And as a government employee, this is really the big difference with the contractor. And so we need to have that. And that's really something that I don't really get asked a lot about in terms of, hey, how did you ended up here? And that demonstrates, I guess, the fact that anyone in the U.S. can succeed.
So what I'll say to that, Nick, is stop right there, because that'll be our follow-on podcast episode. We'll discuss that, because that is a fascinating subject that would require some beers to have a conversation over, because there is a lot. Technology has opened the door where it can, remove some of the barriers that we have historically put in place from a society here. That you can look at and say, hey, maybe those are no longer needed because technology has removed those, or should have removed those.
Yeah, and just to
when you look at,
go ahead. Nick.
Sorry. Well, when you look at stuff like Kubernetes, right, and you can learn Kubernetes in a couple of years, and you can get pretty high paying job. I mean, you're talking way above $100,000 So anyone can really do that. There's not a lot of background you have to understand to embrace Kubernetes moving forward. So, I mean, someone with 2 years of experience making that kind of money, I mean, in the past, that would be never heard of. And it's very common now, both in data science and Kubernetes and stuff you can simply learn by watching a bunch of YouTube videos. You know, I wasn't taught anything other than self-learning and, you know, getting access to books. And by the way, when you're back in France, when I was, 7, when I started coding, all of the books were in English and I didn't speak English. I can tell you it's a little bit harder to understand what's going on. And things are getting way, way easier. And particularly with the self-learning capabilities out there of YouTube and all these videos that are free for access. I mean, you can have a phone and learn pretty much anything today that you don't know.
And it's funny, you mentioned the Kubernetes. I saw a LinkedIn post that we were all kind of laughing at, that there was a job posting of you needed 10 years of Kubernetes.
Yeah,
that was hilarious.
It's 6 years old and they were asking 12 years experience. So that tells you, that tells you.
That was great.
How funny.
So I want to go back a little bit. You touched on the SIs and the impact of Platform One and what you're doing. How does the creation of the new custom workloads from hardened containers and tools impact that model, that SI model, as we evolve and mature? How do you see the SI community reacting to this?
Yeah, I think it's been very interesting. And when you look at the ability for any company out there, whether it's an SI or Prime or a sub or a new startup that's never done any business with DoD, they can go on Repo One and look at the onboarding guide for containers and get any of their existing software capability hardened and approved for DoD use, DoD-wide, across multiple classification levels, way faster than anything else there is. And it also applies to the classified side. Where is really the meaningful stuff happening is obviously on the classified side. So if you only have FedRAMP and you're providing a SaaS solution, you're very much limited to the very low level of classification, even sometimes not even FOUO when it comes to DoD. And so that does not provide a meaningful market, probably less than 10% of the DoD's funding. If you compare that with containers and the ability to deploy your container across classification levels for a company, that's access to the entire DoD. And really, we can do it in 2 to 4 weeks now and get containers approved and reviewed and scanned. And it's a pretty easy process. We even provide the OS, the base OS container stigged, already complying with all the DoD requirements. That makes really the adoption much, much easier. And that creates this continuous delivery of software. And so they should use their pipeline to deploy automatically into Repo One, which then turns into a container in Iron Bank, which is a centralized repo of containers. And then we replicate Iron Bank to the classified environments. So now you have a single path to delivery, very much like when I moved to the US, there's this legal immigration process that you can follow. This is the legal way to deliver software bits to the DoD. And so when we see primes and SIs turn their existing capabilities into containers that can be consumed and licensed on demand, they are becoming a software company.
Yes. Yeah, that's the interesting thing is, and I think it's a lot of it's missed when you do your presentation, because a lot of it's focused on the tools that are hardened in order for you to create custom workloads. But the custom workloads that come out of there are now hardened, repeatable, reusable services that can be used across DoD or across the government and public sector in general. That's where I think the multitude of money savings will occur over time, because you're not reinventing the wheel department by department.
Yeah, it's Lego blocks. It's really the concept of real Lego blocks. There's something you could not do just with sharing source code, because it would be running on different stacks, different platforms. So having the same abstraction layer with Kubernetes and containers enable teams to deliver these Lego blocks. And then the cyber stack being agnostic and being running alongside as the sidecar container, not touching your bits, means we can update the cyber stack independently from the containers. And so you don't have to recompile everything. And so that enables releases decoupled across teams. And so now teams could share Lego blocks You could think of sensors or different capabilities out there that could be shared across teams. And then what you do with the data of that sensor is a separate container that can then take action and push that to another container, taking another action. And so really that creates the modularity that we need and the flexibility that's really needed to move at the pace of relevance.
Great.
Looking at the future, I mean, you've started to touch on IoT and data collection, and I think you're already on the leading and bleeding edge of software development and containerization in Kubernetes. But are there any other future software or application development technologies or any other AI, et cetera, trends that you're monitoring closely?
Yeah, there are a lot of things going on. I think a big chunk is digital engineering. Dr. Oprah has been a big proponent of emulation and simulation for the weapons to be able to know what's feasible, what's not feasible. Instead of having to build hardware and try things out, you can emulate everything, including your entire architecture and your entire hardware component. And that's really exciting. So digital engineering, AI, machine learning, deep learning tools. Obviously, we have dozens of options now, so it really brings a ton of flexibility. And then, there are always buzzwords, right, that I often don't pay attention to most of those, blockchain and other things. Some do bring tangible value, some don't, right? A big chunk of the time we spend is on the cyber side, so behavior detection, right? And really, anything that's GitOps based. So a big chunk of the time is now looking at Git as a source of truth for everything. And so comparing what's running in production with your Git repo, and looking at drifts can be a sign either of a bad actor that's running stuff it shouldn't be running, or just inside a threat, or just drifts that should not have happened. So how do you enforce? And one of the big gaps, and that's why we're funding a lot of CBERs with startups, is on the GitOps security piece, to have products compare the source code with your production environment and see drifts and automatically prevent or detect or alert regarding these kind of drifts. That's one of the big time being spent on the security piece right now.
Yeah, Nick, Rick and I had a wager with that specific question that GitOps would come into the fray. So.
You won.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've been tracking for a while, and obviously I know your team has been as well. So
let's kind of build on it.
Yeah, for sure.
And we talked a lot about successes with Platform One so far, but and this is kind of an unfair question, Nick, with the ContinuousX moniker on our podcast. But what's your end game with Platform One? Where would you consider saying, okay, let's take a little rest point and saying, yes, we've achieved nirvana for you?
I don't think that's something that exists because everything moves so fast. That's one of the big problems when it comes to culture. People say culture is hard and tech is easy. I think it's completely not true. In fact, I think culture is hard because tech is hard and tech is moving so fast, which makes the culture adoption more scary for most people. Self-learning and continuous learning is critical when you look at things like Service Mesh that didn't even exist 2 years ago, which are foundational now for any microservice architecture and Kubernetes and containers. You will not be able to do the decoupling you need to do without a Service Mesh. That is mind-boggling, right, for people to even be able to keep up doing their job while keeping up with what's going on. And my opinion is you need at least an hour a day just to learn continuously, watch YouTube videos, whether it's CNCF, Foundation, or any type of content you're trying to keep up with. Really critical to be able to have access to those. And Platform One, there are so many pieces. One, we need to be cross classification levels. And there are a lot of silos and there are a lot of different teams we need to help. And then, of course, you need to bring a ton of different tools from digital engineering to AI machine learning to DevSecOps. So there is so much to do. I'm not sure, by the time, we get even to a 10th of my list, I'm adding another, 200 items. So, I'm not sure we're going to get there ever.
Well, on that subject, I know, when we spoke before, you took your hour and a half, car ride into the Pentagon and you used that time to, learn Kubernetes, learn new technology. Are you still keeping that up, even though you're not doing the commute right now?
Yeah, that's one of the things that Chloe has been impacted with staying home. I end up doing more meetings instead of watching more content. I'm not sure which one is best, but what I also find out is that there's less company and there's less content out there. There's less CNCF videos being published. There was a very strong impact when it comes to the virus on some of that content. Some are doing a better job, being able to do this from home. Some really are struggling, and I don't see much big announcements being made compared to the usual pace. Yeah. So I think everything is a bit slower, which I guess will also impact the training. But we have to realize though that the other countries are not waiting for us to catch up.
Great.
So Nick, and I've realized you're in an appointed position. What's next for you?
I don't know. What I know is the minute I think about what's next, then that means I'm out, right? And I don't want to think this way because, I'm the kind of guy that's fully committed. I don't do things halfway. I can't do part-time or start having something on the side. Or, when I build companies, I did 12 companies. I was all in. Sometimes I had, multiple companies at the same time, but I was still, fully devoted to the idea and making this happen. If I start thinking about what's next, it's not going to be the right thing for the taxpayer. What I know is, of course, the job is exhausting. It's probably not healthy to be working that much. But I think the impact has been significant. And when I think of, I had twins and I have my, 19-month daughter. I wish I could spend a little bit more time with them for sure. But when I see the impact and the fact that this is probably going to be impacting their whole generations to come, if we really shift that mindset and that culture now and embrace it across the DoD, I think the impact will be really what I'm after here. And so, what's next? I don't know. I don't want to find out just yet.
That's good.
All right. So we're going into the lightning round. Mike, did you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. We're going into the lightning round. These are the couple of questions that we asked on each podcast. And for you, I already know the answer, but we're going to ask it anyway. The religious aspect of whether you call it DevOps or DevSecOps, because DevOps has security built in. Where do you stand on that? And I kind of know the answer, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think for me it's an evolution, right? It's very much like Agile turning to DevOps and DevOps turning to DevSecOps. It's almost like a drastic change, and not everyone really understand what we mean by DevSecOps. It's not just static dynamic analysis, it's zero trust, behavior detection. It's that baked-in security on the continuous monitoring side, and that was really brought to life with Kubernetes, thanks to having that enforcement at the runtime level, not just the build and the pipeline phase. The pipeline stuff, everyone can do that kind of stuff. That's easy. The runtime piece and the continuous monitoring piece in runtime is what I call the DevSecOps piece. And that's really a drastic change. And so I think it's more like a maturity level. People will get there just a matter of time.
Understood. Good answer.
Perfect. Well, Nick, this is the final question. Then you're off the hot seat. So it's a play on the actual podcast name, the ContinuousX podcast series here. So we like to end it by asking all of the guests that are a part of it, if you could continuously, now I will caveat, the last episode we just filmed, somebody thought it was work related. This is personally, if you could continuously do one thing, what would it be?
That's a good question. What could it be? Sleep.
That's actually been taken. Someone already
That's a new
said that
one. Yeah, we haven't had that one yet. Nice.
Yeah, right now it's sleep. But when you have twins, obviously the second answer would be spending more time with the kids.
That makes a lot of sense.
Whoop, I muted myself.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Nick, on behalf of Rick and Mike and myself and the DLT folks, really want to say thank you for participating. As always, it's a great conversation when we're able to sit down and do this. and definitely look forward to the next one down the road, and wish you and your family best of health. And thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for everything you're doing for the community.
Yeah, you bet.
Right,
Thanks.
Thanks, Nick.